that we can't often perceive that is just right around us all the time. And we have a problem discussing this. People say, oh, it's like some other dimension, or it's some higher dimension, and then somebody will inevitably say, well, what is a dimension? How can you say that it's a dimension, and how can you possibly know that it's higher than ours?
When a physicist or a neurosurgeon has an experience, you listen to them. When an ordinary person has such a thing, you don't listen to them. And I'm like, why? Why? It's the same experience. The answer to the why is it's the culture. It's how knowledge is being constructed at that particular.
It actually has nothing to do with the actual experiences or with what's being communicated.
We have to get to a common point because there are so many millions of people that have had experiences of some just adjacent realm to ours. And by merely putting experiencers of one modality near experiencers of another modality, that conversational chain opens up.
The near-death experience is of interest to those of us who are involved in examining these edgy topics in human function. Some of the cases are very famous and known, and some of them are absolutely staggering. For example, someone who is blind from birth, never saw anything. During a cardiac arrest, describes the experience of lifting out of the body and seeing things, and then describing them in detail. I mean, as a physicist, I can't even imagine. In principle, I would think, well, unless your brain has been, processed to interpret optical images, I mean, I can't even imagine how that could occur. That is pretty compelling.
The pre-coma me would have said basically that the brain takes sensory input, like from eyes, ears, touch, balance systems, etc., assembles that in kind of a version of the now involving the physical body, but then you have access to memories of all the events you've been through. And the piece I would have missed tremendously, that I know now since my coma is very real, are the aspects of conscious awareness and information access that go beyond the ken of our physical senses.
All that speaks to the issue that we are somehow connected, and as a quantum physicist, I say quantum entanglement, we're somehow connected to the universe around us well beyond what we usually take cognizance of, just based on our typical five senses.
A Las Vegas businessman is plopping down $1 million to find out if there is evidence of an afterlife. Space entrepreneur Robert Bigelow has announced the creation of a new institute that is devoted to research into whether human consciousness survives physical death.
Robert Bigelow is an entrepreneur. He has made most of his money in real estate and hotels, and he's done a lot of the work in the aerospace area. He, just a few years ago, decided to turn his attention and his resources toward investigating the evidence for survival of death.
Robert Bigelow's been interested in UFOs for a very long time, I think since he was a young man, basically. And he decided to offer financial support to the study of UFOs, and he set up a group called the National Institute for Discovery Science. NIDS is the abbreviation, in which he brought together some of the best people in the field, among them people like Hal Puthoff and Jacques Vallée, and a lot of people we're familiar with today.
And that's where I met people like Whitley Strieber, John Mack, and of course Jacques and I were part of that.
Mr. Bigelow's had a long-standing interest in paranormal phenomena and UFO or alien-type phenomena and the paranormal aspects of this.
If you sort of trace it back, it is a lot of the same people. I mean, Harry Reid knew Bob Bigelow. I think he influenced Harry Reid. He also was the contractor, not surprisingly, that worked for the ATIP program at the Pentagon that Harry Reid set up.
As it turns out, Robert Bigelow separately set up something called Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies. He decided to put up a lot of money, I mean millions of dollars, to investigate near-death experience.
Why is it important that somebody like Robert Bigelow, somebody with the means that Robert Bigelow has, that he's providing the funding for this kind of research?
There isn't funding anywhere else. Private individuals, especially private individuals with means, are some of the only people who are willing to take a risk on this because they're not worried about their reputation. So they have the freedom to take risks, to go in experimental, edgy directions. There's not that kind of willingness to explore within the business world. In the world of startups, like we think about people taking risks and, you know, trying new technologies, but even that all is super conservative compared to doing this kind of research.
When you lose loved ones, it does provoke that question. Well, did they survive? And it's happened to me. Robert Bigelow has had tragedy in his family. He's lost some loved ones, including his wife. And so, yeah, I think absolutely it's not just an intellectual quest, it's a very personal quest.
Just a few months ago, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the chief of AARO, resigned. This is the #1 UFO hunter for the government, trying to make sense of this. And he did take a parting shot on the way out the door. And a group of people who all know each other for decades, are kind of at the tipping point of this movement.
It's unfortunate that he felt the need to do that.
That's Miller. That's LA.
Yeah, but those people were only the catalyst. They aren't the ones still moving the arrow, right? So all those people have done, I mean, it's not positively, they brought others in. Others who looked at the data and said, this is what's doing it.
This morning, the former leader of the Pentagon's UFO tracking division is casting some doubt on the existence of alien craft. Sean Kirkpatrick is the former director of AARO, and he's since retired, but he's been doing some press.
After the hearing, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick refuted Rush's claims in a letter published on his personal LinkedIn page. He wrote, AARO has yet to find any credible evidence to support the allegations of a reverse engineering program for non-human technology.
Sean Kirkpatrick put a negative spin on it and said, well, there's just this group of groupies who are, big on UFOs and ETs and so on, and they just keep talking to each other and sharing data back and forth. That's the scientific method. Nothing wrong with that. So there's kind of a disconnect there between his statement about it versus the people who are actually involved.
And yet at the same time, AARO, the office that he oversaw, published that there's a number of cases that we don't understand, including these metal balls that seem to be flying around our battlefields. And they say, we can't figure it out, but we're going to tell you it's not ET, because we haven't proven it. But it's still moving in ways that we don't know how to do it. What else do you call it?
If you want to solve this mystery, if you want to get to the bottom of this, the best thing you could possibly do would be to get the U.S. intelligence community to take this on, to find answers, because they have capabilities that are exquisite. We have just insane sort of capabilities that the public often doesn't know about, but we've got satellites in geosynchronous orbit, in low Earth orbit, in highly elliptical orbits, things under the ocean, air platforms, and new generations of things. We have 17 different space surveillance capabilities. Nobody in the science world has capabilities like that. And I think that gives us hope that within our lifetimes we may really get to the bottom of this.
It's clear to me at a very high level, we're talking the National Security Council and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, that both of them have directed, we do not want to disclose all we know about UAP. So that is reflected in the latest AARO report, for example, in which Sean Kirkpatrick is now saying and coming out. I'm sure he has some alignment or association with those two offices. It seems to me that he is part of the disinformation campaign. And it's clear the government does not want to disclose.
Well, they can say it's not a UFO because maybe they've identified it. And they know that what it is, right?
We're in some kind of a race, and the race is with destiny, human destiny, and the destiny of whoever or whatever is here. You have the Defense Department resisting every step of the way because they've got so much to hide, and the embarrassment when the truth comes out is going to be, to say the least, fantastic.
Imagine if you did have a recovered craft. It's something the equivalent of taking something back to, the 1700s and dropping a brand new Harley Davidson motorcycle. But they ain't gonna figure out. And they don't figure out the gasoline, they'll figure out anything. They might kick it over and it, boom, and kicks off. But, and that's sort of like where we're at right now.
Some people think, the government has the full picture and they just don't want to tell us. I think it's just as likely they're reluctant to tell us what they know because of lack of information. It's because they don't have the answers, and it scares them because it's like, where is this stuff from? We don't really know.
I have classified military information on this captured planes that's coming to our picture.
Can you say anything else? And we go all the way to the limit.
Let's bring it to the limit.
Regardless of what happens in Washington, D.C. with the disclosure narrative, and who knows where that's going to go, the cat has been let out. I think that there is a growing number of people who are picking this up as a real legitimate line of inquiry. These are anthropologists and religious studies and philosophers. We're seeing people teaching UFO classes in colleges. And so this is a brand new world.
We should be constructing the arguments in a way that will convince the public that we're serious about it. You can't claim a scientific conclusion if you don't produce the science that you used to come to the conclusion for other people to verify. Otherwise, it's just a argument. You are passing on as truth a story.
I actually don't think we'll ever get a scientific model for this because it's not science. We can go outside right now and I can try to prove to you that there are stars in the sky, and you'll just look at me like, you're crazy. And if we couldn't go out at night, if we were bound to noon, you would win the argument every single time. So it's actually the context that matters. It's not me telling you there are stars in the sky. You won't ever believe me because there's no way to go out at night. And so that's really what we need. We need a way to go out at night and look at the stars, and we just don't have that. Science is restricted to sound, to cognitive reason and the senses. And this is about other states that we don't actually know how to study because they don't follow those rules.
It may be that all of these experiences, whether it's a UFO encounter, whether it's so-called poltergeist activity, whether it's a near-death experience, or reflections or snapshots in a certain sense of this extra physical field in which the psyche participates. From my perspective, it's a very exciting time because we're experiencing not only the mainstreaming of the UFO thesis, but the conversation around UFOs and the conversation around the psychical or the extra-physical are starting to converge. And that's a hallmark of our time.
train.
Everything was on fire. Everything was burning.
Disasters can begin with the smallest things.
Changing the opening hours of a restaurant. Bad glue job. A paperwork error.
Now, combining the latest research with every available source of evidence, experts will forensically analyze 3 disasters, down to each tiny detail.
You've really got to think outside the box.
You have to work your way back and understand each link in the chain.
State-of-the-art graphics reveal every critical detail at every critical moment.
This whole disaster could have been averted.
We can dissect them, get inside, or underneath, freeze time, and even reverse it. To conduct a complete disaster autopsy. Houston, Texas. February 1st, 2003, Mission Control. Space Shuttle Columbia is returning to Earth after a flawless 16-day mission.
Things seem to be going well, what they call normal.
15 minutes into re-entry, Mission Control radios Shuttle Commander Rick Husband.
Houston, we see your tire pressure messages and we did not come there. Instrumentation, Mac.
Mission Control never hear from Columbia again. People on the ground realize something has gone terribly wrong.
Columbia, Houston, com check. Columbia, Houston, UHF, com check.
You see these streaks of light going across the sky behind the shuttle, and you know something awful has happened.
All 7 astronauts are lost.
It's clear that no one survived that.
Now, using evidence from the wreckage, NASA telemetry and scientific analysis, we will reconstruct the entire disaster. What brings down Space Shuttle Columbia? More than 84,000 pieces of debris are recovered across Louisiana and Texas, including one miraculous discovery. A data recorder from Columbia is found almost completely intact. It holds vital readings from sensors all over the spacecraft before and during the disaster. We also have the data transmitted from Columbia back to Earth.
NASA has lots and lots of telemetry from Columbia. In fact, Mission Control could see far more of what was going on in Columbia than the flight crew could.
This data tells us that immediately before entering Earth's atmosphere, Columbia is in the correct 40-degree nose-up orientation. But just minutes later, anomalies appear in the flight data.
The spacecraft is being pulled to the left, so the onboard computer is using the control systems on the wings to try and pull it back.
This is alarming. It's critical the shuttle continues pointing nose forward, because it is still traveling at over 18,000 miles per hour.
If you're not flying straight ahead, if you're tilted to the side, the forces are so great, the spacecraft will break apart.
But examination of the flight data reveals a rapidly deteriorating situation.
Not only is the aircraft turning to the left, but it's rolling to the left, indicating that the left wing is losing lift.
The control surfaces on the wing are struggling to keep the shuttle pointing straight.
About 15 minutes after re-entry, the flight computer fires the RCS.
The RCS is a system of tiny rockets designed to orientate the shuttle.
At this point, you've got 2 different systems trying to control the left yaw. You've got the RCS and you've got the aileron trim. But despite their best efforts, the drag is still increasing, the left yaw is still increasing. The problem, whatever it is getting worse.
Returning to space is not an option.
The shuttle is effectively an unpowered, massive glider, and it's only going one way.
Eyewitnesses on the ground start to see pieces of debris coming off the shuttle.
What we think happened is that the nose went up. The spacecraft goes into a flat spin, and with the aerodynamic forces working on this spacecraft, which is still travelling at 10,000 miles per hour, the spacecraft just gets ripped to shreds.
Why do they lose control of the shuttle? The data shows Columbia is turning and rolling to the left.
The only thing that would really cause that is if the wing was changing shape mid-flight.
How can a solid wing change shape?
Being NASA, they have sensors everywhere. They measure temperature, load, other conditions of the spacecraft.
The sensors inside the wing transmit vital clues.
About 4.5 minutes after the re-entry interface, 4 of those temperature sensors started sending some very strange responses. One of those sensors that was expected to be around 30 degrees Fahrenheit was showing 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which is still high, but okay. Then a second census that was expected to be around 20 degrees Fahrenheit started showing 450 Fahrenheit, which is a very big anomaly.
As the shuttle descent continues, there are more and more data anomalies.
The sensors on the landing gear suddenly start going haywire. The landing gear is up, it's down, it's locked, it's not locked.
All these different sensors start failing simultaneously, but they're not connected. So what's happening?
The only common factor is that they are all inside the left wing. Temperature sensors suggest the wing interior is getting hot enough to damage the other sensors.
The question is, where is the heat coming from?
During re-entry, the shuttle slows from around 18,000 miles an hour to just a couple of hundred miles an hour.
All spacecraft use what's called aerobraking. They use the drag generated by entering the atmosphere to slow them down.
The amount of heat that generates actually means the air itself starts to separate, the particles start to separate, and it turns into something we call plasma.
The glowing white-hot plasma surrounding the shuttle on re-entry can reach temperatures of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
If all these sensors are failing at once, the most likely culprit is that the superheated air generated during re-entry is actually getting inside the wing.
That would inflict catastrophic damage.
With this plasma inside the wing, things are just distorting, and it explains many of the strange readings that we're getting.
But the parts of Columbia in contact with the plasma should be protected by ceramic tiles on the underside and reinforced carbon-carbon panels, known as RCC, on the wing's leading edge. Is hot enough to damage the other sensors.
4 of those temperature sensors started sending some very strange responses. One of those sensors that was expected to be around 30 degrees Fahrenheit was showing 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which is still high, but okay. Then a second census that was expected to be around 20 degrees Fahrenheit started showing 450 Fahrenheit, which is a very big anomaly.
As the shuttle descent continues, there are more and more data anomalies.
The sensors on the landing gear suddenly start going haywire. The landing gear is up, it's down, it's locked, it's not locked.
All these different sensors start failing simultaneously, but they're not connected. So what's happening?
The only common factor is that they are all inside the left wing. Temperature sensors suggest the wing interior is getting hot enough to damage the other sensors.
The question is, where is the heat coming from?
During re-entry, the shuttle slows from around 18,000 miles an hour to just a couple of hundred miles an hour.
all spacecraft use what's called aerobraking. They use the drag